Tobias Matthew is a TikToker and self-healing coach who helps people become their own saviours and overcome their past trauma and limiting beliefs. If you truly want to become your highest self, you need to hear what he has to say.
For a long time, I was living my life believing that I needed something or someone outside of me to complete it. Being your own saviour, for me, just means fundamentally realising no one's coming to save you, and that actually we are creating our own reality by kind of the beliefs that we have, by the memories that we're holding on to, the trauma and the wounds that exist within us. You are not your trauma, you are not your anxiety, you're not your problems, and you're not broken, you're none of those things. All it is some crossed wiring. Now just really know and accept that you can heal from that, and you can change, and you can create a new reality.
So what's up, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of my podcast, Happy Days, with me, Callum Church. Now today I'm joined once again by Tobias Matthew. Welcome back to the podcast, Tobias. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, mate. It's great to be back. I loved it last time. So really nice to be back here.
Now we're going to have a good episode, man. To kick us off, do you want to introduce yourself or reintroduce yourself to the listeners and just let us know who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I think the way I said it last time was I'm just a normal guy, whatever that means. So we'll stick with that. So yeah, I'm Tobias. I'm now actually a coach. I don't know the exact title to call it because everyone calls themselves all sorts of things. I'm going with self-healing coach, but really I guess it's kind of like a life coach. I'm basically helping people, which we're going to be talking about today, I think a little bit, learning to become their own saviors, heal from past trauma, past wounds, things that are holding them back, and create a life that they really want instead of kind of feeling like a victim to their life, which I think so many of us feel like a lot of the time today. So that's kind of me really in a nutshell. It's what I'm doing.
Awesome, man. So let's jump into it straight away. So when you say be your own savior, you help people become their own saviors. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So what it all boils down to for me is I use that phrase there, approaching life as the creator of it instead of the victim to it. Right. This is actually a quote from Joe Dispenza, which I love a lot. I guess to kind of paint the picture of this, I want to explain a little bit about kind of what brought me to it, because I think that helped people understand. For a long time, I was living my life believing that I needed something or someone outside of me to complete my life, to make me happy. And no matter what I kind of went after and achieved or got, it never really brought that lasting satisfaction. There was always like still that kind of inner void, that emptiness within me. And I felt like a victim. I felt like, again, that kind of life was happening to me, and that I was, again, waiting for something or someone else to come and complete my life. Being your own savior, for me, just means fundamentally realizing no one's coming to save you. And that actually we are creating our own reality by kind of the beliefs that we have, by the memories that we're holding on to, the trauma and the wounds that exist within us, and taking ownership for those things, understanding them, letting them go, healing them, and realizing that it's those things that are creating the reality that we've got, not so much what's happening to us externally. So really embodying that, changing what we need to change to again, save ourselves from whatever it is that we're dealing with as individuals, and just really learning to embody this for ourselves instead of waiting for someone else to do it.
So why did you want to sort of set up as a coach and start helping people to heal themselves? Like, where's that drive come from for you? Is that just, maybe it's you offering advice for your past self or something like that, do you think?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I created this because it's for me. This is ultimately what it's about. It's like, and this is what I work with my coach on, when he was like, we'll create a coaching program. Well, I can help people with the journey that I've been on. That's I don't need any certifications to do that. And my journey has been one going from feeling incomplete in myself, being honest, having wounds within me where I felt, not good enough, that I needed to do something, to be someone, to get validation and approval from other people, to basically try and get a relationship, was a big part of it as well. To realizing that all of those things, no matter what I got, wasn't going to heal that thing within me, and that I had to do it for myself. But as to why I started doing this, really, it's a little bit more, I don't quite know the word for it, but being honest, I always had this feeling growing up that I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something to kind of help the world. I know it sounds a little bit cheesy to say that. I used to kind of suppress and deny that part of me because I felt that it was arrogant or unrealistic. But I knew it was there. I knew it was there. And I kind of thought, well, maybe politics, but there was still that part of me that was like, who are you? Who are you to be a politician? Who are you to be anyone big? I think we're all conditioned with this in some way today, right? Trying to get us to stay within the straight and narrow, kind of what we spoke about last time, I think. But it was when I went through with everything that happened with COVID, and when I went through my period of depression, anxiety, had a breakdown because of, living alone during lockdown and just not being able to cope with it, coming out the other side of that, and then uncovering the world of spirituality and mindfulness and how the mind works and all this stuff, and just realizing in that moment, I was like, well, shit, this is kind of, I don't want to say it's the answer because it makes it sound like, oh yeah, just become spiritual and the whole world gets fixed. But I realized very quickly that pretty much all of the issues we deal with today in the world come back to, at their root, how we as individuals relate to our mind, and the fact that at a global scale, it's a reflection of what's actually was happening within me and us as individuals of my own unhealed trauma, and it's like, we've got so much unhealed trauma as a collective that's kind of manifesting what we're seeing out, with all the problems in the world today, I think. So I really just saw that this was, it went from me, again, feeling like a victim to the governments and the corporations that were kind of, in my view at the time, ruining the world and all this stuff, and realizing that actually I was responsible myself, and that the only way to kind of change these things was to change myself and change, my actions and change how I basically heal myself, and like as Gandhi always said, like, change yourself to change the world kind of thing. And so I really just, it clicked for me in that moment. And I was like, I really need to help get this out there to more people, because the stuff I'm dealing with, my friends and family are dealing with, and none of them were taught any of this stuff either. So I guess that was really kind of the original motivation for it, as to why I really want to kind of commit to this. And I didn't even know I wanted to be a coach at the time. I just thought, I want to kind of maybe start a blog, do some affiliate marketing, something like that. And more I got into the online business world and then met my coach, she was like, dude, why don't you coach? And I was like, am I ready for this? But he helped me see that, it's, you only need to be one step ahead of someone else to add value in their journey. And now we're here about 9 months later. So it's been quite a journey.
Good stuff, dude. Good stuff. Just quickly, how did you sort of build up the courage to be able to take that step as stepping into that sort of role of the coach? Because I think that you probably get quite a lot of, imposter monster with that sort of thing, imposter syndrome. So how do you overcome that?
It's a good question. I really put it down to, Michael Singer? Do you know his book, The Surrender Experiment?
I've heard of it. I don't know anything about it though. Go on.
So I mean, this is where it gets quite spiritual. I really put it down to the fact that it's not really me creating it. And I think I was listening to a podcast that Tony Robbins was doing earlier with Michael Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul, when he wrote The Surrender Experiment. And they were saying, I don't think anybody who's created, unless somebody is quite asleep and obviously within their own ego, but most people who create big success know that at some level, they're not really doing it. It's like there's something happening through them. There's some kind of universal force, or call it luck, coincidence, whatever happens that kind of puts those opportunities in front of you. As I kind of started finding a spiritual practice and just had this faith that actually there was some kind of the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, kind of, it almost sounds like grandiose sort of saying this, but like kind of acting through me in a sense, and I really kind of got that feeling quite early on. And the more I surrendered to these things, to the things like even just getting out on Facebook or social media, that the old identity that I had in myself, I could have never have done that. And I just surrendered, which is what the Surrender Experiment's all about, surrendered that kind of ego like idea I had in my mind and did it. The more I realized was actually like, we're completely capable of doing whatever we decide we're capable of, and as soon as we let go of the beliefs we have that say we can't do it, you kind of can. So I just really started to let go and I guess just trust myself, really.
It's fascinating what you say about sort of like almost like a force is acting through you. Is there a way that you can sort of like consciously tap into that or anything like that, or are we getting?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting down some big esoteric stuff, right? And I know people will hear that and they'll be like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" You know, because I'm not saying that what I'm trying to say is that this is within all of us. You know, this is a force of life. It's the, you know, collective unconscious, the super conscious that people like Carl Jung and Freud have theorized for a long time. I see it as just tapping into higher levels of consciousness and you know, or different levels of consciousness. It's the flow state. You know, anyone who's ever kind of done something and been fully immersed in that and it's all just going perfectly, you know, if you play a bit of sport and you just play like the most crazy rally of your life playing tennis, you know, we've all had these moments. That I believe is what it is. It's this whatever you want to call it, this consciousness, the kind of the purer level of consciousness which we're all which I believe we're all connected to and all a part of, just kind of, you know, channeling through us. And I guess really the way to get there that I've found, that I see other people talk about, is to follow your heart and do something that you really love. And if you're in that moment, then, you know, you're going to be in flow in some way.
Yeah, and you got to keep experimenting as well. You know, just got to do what feels right. Keep sort of like, yeah, just trying to feel your way through that, and I think you'll get there. You know, and that's where all the good things happen. Like you say, you know, it all sort of all falls into place. You know, all falls into place. Anyway. Went on a bit of a tangent there. Let's bring it back to like the self-healing
stuff. Go on, deep
stuff.
straight away.
Yeah. I mean, that was we jumped straight into it with that.
We did, mate.
Hopefully we didn't scare away too many people already. But listen, let's talk about some of the trauma stuff. Because you mentioned trauma and sort of healing from trauma, and why, you know, a lot of the reason why we are the way we are is because of a lot of maybe past traumas which we haven't healed from. So first of all, how do you identify these traumas?
Just before answering that, I want to clarify something, because I think a lot of people will hear the word trauma and they'll be like, well, that's not me. You know, we're conditioned to associate trauma with like emergency department, you know, really big, serious, critical stuff. Truth is, everybody goes through trauma. I believe everybody has unhealed trauma at some level, unless they've somehow managed to grow up in some perfect environment, or, you know, even then, trauma is about the perception of the event, not the event itself. You know, this is what they actually come in to show today, right? So it's not just people who survive, you know, abuse or go through war or PTSD from, you know, wars, right? As I already said, there's big T trauma and there's little T trauma. Big T trauma is those really, really big things. Little T trauma can be something as simple as getting left out of the school football team, or your mum, you know, shouting at you because you've been annoying all day. And you take that in the moment as, oh, that happened because I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or whatever it is, you know, and we don't process that emotion properly. And that pain literally gets stored in our body as trauma. And we create an identity about who we are based on that particular thing. And then it gets reinforced time and time again, and it becomes a belief, you know, that's kind of how it works. So just want to clarify that first of all. You know, it's important to understand that I really, really believe we all have this at some level. And it's important to embrace and not get scared by the word trauma, because again, it's about the perception of the events you're in, not the event itself. But yeah, what you originally asked me, you said, how do we identify what these are? Is that what it is?
Yeah. How do you identify the trauma in the first place? I mean, you gave some examples there, but how can someone, you know, for someone listening to this that might want to try and sort of like step into healing themselves, or maybe want to learn more about the work that you do, you know, how do they identify it in the first place? Do they have to work with someone like yourself, or can they do it, you know, on their own solo?
You can definitely do it on your own solo, you know, and this even with my coaching, the idea at the end is to equip people to be able to feel confident doing this for themselves. You know, that's what the whole Be Your Own Saviour is about. Yes, working with someone is probably the best way to do it, whether that is a therapist or a coach or someone like that, but not all the time. You know, I think the most important thing is awareness, it's self-awareness, you know, and understanding, not just kind of, this is where it becomes being your own savior and being the creator instead of being the victim. You know, if something happens that triggers you, the unconscious victim identified person would say, oh, you made me really angry there. You made me upset. That person made me feel sick. No, they didn't. That person, that incident, that situation triggered something within you, and the emotion that you felt because of the way you were triggered was anger, was fear, was whatever it was. You know, it's within us. It's claiming that responsibility that it's within us. That, you know, if situations were different. If you didn't have that thing within you, that person doing that thing might not have bothered you at all. It might have just blown, brushed past you. So it's claiming that responsibility, and it's really leaning into our triggers. If something triggers you, don't just put it on that other person or dismiss it. Or what we often do is kind of, we don't like looking at the difficult parts of ourselves, particularly our ego doesn't like looking at the bits of ourselves where we mess up, where we fail, where we have a cringy moment, and we suppress it and we go, no, I don't want to look at that. And it dumbs it down into our shadow. And as Carl Jung really was the guy who kind of revealed this idea of the shadow. The shadow is just the parts of ourselves that we aren't consciously aware of because we don't want to look at them, but they still impact the way that we live, right? And so most of our trauma acts as kind of shadow aspects of ourselves. Let's say a defensive mechanism will come out where you respond with anger when somebody criticizes you, right? And you might say, well, that person made me angry because they criticized me. Well, again, no, they didn't. It just triggered something within you where you felt insecure and unsafe, and anger was the coping mechanism, the emotional response that was triggered within you to do with that. So it's about leaning into what triggers you and reflecting and actually being like, okay, well, this happened. Why did that happen? Okay, well, it happened because I didn't feel safe. Okay, why didn't I feel safe? It didn't feel safe because I felt that I was going to be judged. Why does that bother me? And we keep asking, this exercise called like the 7 levels of why. You can get to the underlying belief that's usually associated with it. And there's a phrase which I got from Joe Vitale, which is, the meaning that we give an event is the belief that attracted it. So let's say we're talking about an event where, let's take it to something that's been quite relevant for me and a lot of people, relationships, right? And a lot of people struggle to get relationships. You might say, oh, I can't find a partner, a boyfriend or a girlfriend because all the good ones are taken. Well, the meaning you've given that event is actually the belief that attracted that event to happen. You believe that all the good ones are taken, and therefore you keep attracting and creating that situation. That's how powerful our beliefs are, So we identified the belief by looking at the meaning we give a situation. And again, do the same thing, the 7 levels of why, and kind of dig down deeper. What we'll find at its root, it fundamentally comes down to feelings, one of kind of 5 or 6 core wounds that we get. Feelings of not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy of love, or not feeling worthy at all, not feeling seen, not feeling understood, not feeling heard, not feeling wanted. Those are, I think it's pretty much variations thereof. At its core, I believe when we're talking about sort of childhood trauma and sort of, deep wounds that the other stuff all kind of comes from what I'm seeing and what I can understand, and maybe someone who's been studying this for years and years might disagree, but it does come back to something like that, some kind of core belief or wound that's there. The reason why I'm focusing on the beliefs and not the event is because it doesn't really matter what happened. I can't remember what originally happened to me between the age of 0 and 7 that made me not feel good enough. I can't remember what happened to me that made me feel like I, as I was not complete, and that I needed to be someone else. And it doesn't really matter. The point is, I know that that's there within me. And when you know that that's there, you can focus on that itself and heal that.
Awesome. So we've identified the trauma or the beliefs. How do we actually go about healing that and sort of overcoming that to no longer, carry these beliefs and this trauma with us?
Yeah, it leads on kind of what I was going to carry on with there. Trauma is stored in the body, and we've got to remember that, like, what is trauma? Trauma basically is unprocessed emotions, emotions that we didn't process properly. Again, we're conditioned by our society from an early age that some emotions are good and some are bad. This idea that, let's say if you're feeling really sad, you might go to your mum and you say, oh, I'm feeling really sad. Well, don't feel sad. You've got nothing to feel sad about, or you're being really angry and you're screaming, and we're sort of taught not to express that. Even extreme happiness, we're kind of is put a lid on as well. And so what we do is we start to run from these emotions, and also, pain and grief and these things are quite difficult. They're not necessarily pleasant. So we run from them. So I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but what we do is we store that emotion in the body. So it's the really important thing is to connect with the body itself. There's an amazing book which I recommend to everybody. The Body Keeps the Score by a Dutch psychologist who basically made his life's mission, looking into PTSD and trauma. And you realize that what happens is that people, and we can look at people who go through intense trauma, big T trauma, PTSD, they're often really disconnected from their body. There's often whole sections of the body that they can't even feel. And this is because it is that emotion. Emotions are energy in motion. It's a physical thing that's stored in the body. We're telling our mind in that moment, this is really painful. I can't deal with it. Protect me from it. And so it will basically cut us off from that part of the body where it's stored. So we want to kind of reconnect with the body and start coming into the body more, creating more body awareness. This is really important for a number of reasons, because if you are someone who's quite anxious anyway, or like most people today, you're probably really identified with your mind and your awareness is always up in your head. We don't realize we can place our awareness throughout our body, and that it's actually really healthy and important for our cells and for our organs and everything to kind of, for our awareness to be placed around these areas and help kind of energy flow freely and all this stuff. So that's really probably the most important step, I would say, is connecting with your body and finding where this trauma is stored, finding where this energy, this tension is stored.
How do you do that? Because that for some people that might sound a bit strange. How do I connect with my body? What do you mean? Put myself into my body more. Like, so what do you mean by that? And secondly, how do we do it?
So the easiest way to do it, and this is what I do with my clients. Let's say we think about something that's triggered you. Again, we don't even have to know here what the underlying wound is, but let's just say there's something that you're dealing with. Someone will come to me and it's like, I struggle with confidence. Okay, well, put yourself in that situation where you don't feel confident. Maybe it was a situation yesterday. Imagine that you're there. Now come into your body. Where do you feel this in your body? And just that question, actually making that realization, often people will suddenly realize, oh shit, yeah, I actually am kind of feeling something in my body here, Or you do a scan of your body. You think about that fear, you think about that lack of confidence, you think about that situation, and you just put your awareness on top of your head and you kind of scan down, you go down your neck, you can notice this and just notice anywhere that's tense, anywhere that's a little bit tight. Maybe there's a bit of a pulsing. Maybe a big clue is you can't feel anything there at all. That was how I found my trauma in my stomach. I was doing this with my coach and I was like, there's a big blank spot in my stomach. And he was like, okay, we're going to come back to that. Because again, I've been disconnected from that for so long. So that's probably the best way to do it. Think about that situation and just kind of scan your body and think where feels tense, where feels tight, and then just sit with that. Just don't try and judge it or control it or do anything with it. Just be present with it. Surround it with your awareness, breathe into it, and kind of get curious about it. What shape does it feel like? What is it doing? How intense are you feeling it? You can ask it questions if you want. You can give it a color. These kind of things can all help us kind of get a bit of a picture for what it is. Hopefully that makes sense.
Just as an example, if you don't mind talking about it, you mentioned that you couldn't feel anything in your stomach.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah. No, I'm really glad you asked me this because I want to talk about it and be open. 1 in 3 people today are diagnosed with stomach conditions. And I myself I don't know if I was ever fully diagnosed with it, but I was basically told I had IBS. For when I was at school, I remember just having crippling sickness. I'd feel so physically sick. I couldn't walk, I couldn't do anything, particularly after eating or doing exercise. And I would never be sick. I would get to this point where if I would, it would just be like a big burp almost, it was so weird. I had every test under the sun. I had tubes up and down everywhere, all sorts of blood tests for years and years and years. And in the end, they were just like, well, it must be IBS. IBS is basically like many diagnoses today. We don't have a clue what's causing this. So this is what it is. You need to go and find out what kind of foods, might flare it up for you. And often, foods do kind of flare it up. Lo and behold, fast forward like 10 years and I'm working with my coach and understanding trauma and then hearing that, 70-80% of modern diseases are caused by suppressed emotions, and that we often suppress the majority of our emotions to our gut, to our stomach, and that, digestive issues are really, really common, and particularly for people who experience some kind of trauma between the age of like 8 and 12, 8 and 15, roughly, something like that. I hadn't forgotten about this, but I hadn't processed it for a while. That when I was 12, when I was at school, I got kicked in my nuts, in my nether regions, and I had to go to hospital, and it was pretty dramatic. And the girl who did it, bless her, she honestly, it was just what those girls were doing at that time. They just thought it was funny. No one really told them it was a serious thing.
Mm.
But I think to try and help herself a little bit, I don't know, she kind of had told them that I'd been saying some things I hadn't. I don't really know what had happened, but anyway, I came back to school, and I felt really, really kind of like judged and picked on, and again, a lot of it was probably how I was perceiving the situation more than anything itself. You have something, go through something like that, the whole school hears about it, there's a lot of shame and guilt and all these things going on. I'd forgotten that I'd gone through that, really, or at least I hadn't thought that it had impacted me that much. But it came up recently working with my coach, and I realized that had happened, and that probably a lot of the stuff that I then developed, like people pleasing habits and stuff like that, I think came maybe from that situation. And I actually feel this tension, this kind of energy in my stomach, and I've really noticed it for months now, and I've been trying to kind of clear it and get rid of it. And I realized that recently, I had this realization over the weekend. What I've been trying to do is almost reject this part of me that basically, trauma is just, it's a snapshot, it's a memory, it's a moment in time, where my younger self felt unloved, unwanted, unheard, unseen, and here I was trying to get rid of it, trying to reject that part of me. And now what I'm focusing on doing is loving it, is really kind of embracing it. And that's definitely helping. But that's kind of my journey with my gut, my stomach. You can feel these blockages in your throat, your back. Lower back pain is a big common thing for early trauma. Your chest. Those are kind of the main areas, really.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's kind of like I mean, for me, what it feels like as someone who's not really sort of like I've heard people talk about this before, but I don't actively think about this sort of stuff. So this is a really interesting conversation for me. But what it sounds like when I'm listening to you saying that, it's almost like when something happens like that, maybe you come back to school the next day and there's that anxiety about people, judging you. And there's also perhaps the shame of being perceived in a certain way, which isn't even, you didn't do anything mean to that girl. You were the victim in that situation, but there might be the shame attached to that as being perceived as that guy. And it's almost like you have that sort of like sinking feeling in your stomach, where you feel a bit sick and like, or a bit uneasy, and it's just not nice. And it's almost like that's just sort of festered there for years. And like you say, like maybe the body's just sort of shut it off because you've just let it sit. You've sat with that feeling and not let it flow, not let it pass,
That's it. And not just that, but added to it, how many times because let's not forget, our triggers are flaring up that energy. That energy wants to be, this is why I say I really recommend reading The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, because he explains how this works. He kind of simplifies this idea of energy, which we spoke about last time, the chakras, natural flowing energy, and how emotions just need to be felt and accepted and let go to. But what we do is we close up and we resist them. We say, I don't want to feel that. And that doesn't do anything with it except store it in our body. And so now we can be in a situation which sort of flares that trauma up again, or maybe we get new anxiety, new emotions coming up, and we resist those as well. And boom, it adds to it and it adds to it, and it builds up and builds up over time. Another thing to watch it or to consume about this is the documentary Heal on Amazon Prime. It's funny that the Eastern model of medicine has known about this for centuries, and the West is only kind of just catching up to it. But they're showing how these things cause so many modern illnesses and diseases, at its root. Build up of suppressed emotions and stress over time that can really lead to physical illnesses such as IBS and other things like that.
Has that issue with your stomach got any better recently, now that you've been sort of like thinking about this sort of stuff? Like, have you seen much progress there, or is it difficult? What's your experience with that?
So physically, so much better. Obviously my diet's really good today, and I look after myself that way much better. But physically, I don't deal with it in any way like I used to before. Some things can cause it to flare up. you know, let's say if I drink too much booze or have too much sugar, you know, those kind of things often do cause it to flare up. But actually, more often than not, it's an emotional thing, right? If I'm feeling something that's sort of triggering that within me, I actually felt this on the weekend in a situation, and yeah, just kind of noticed that oh, the stomach is sort of flaring up, and you know, it's funny that digestive issues are really linked to things like anxiety and sort of feeling stuff like that. So, you know, I wouldn't try and say, oh, look, I'm this fully healed 100% person. Definitely not. I don't even know if, you know, that is the aim. If it's like we're trying to get to this like end point. But it's definitely, you know, it's definitely healing and you know, learning. It's learning to kind of be okay with being in pain. You know, that's really the key. Is to kind of surrender more and more to this feeling inside and not resist it. And when we surrender to it, you know, that's how we kind of let it go more and more. And it's not always just an overnight thing. It's not really an overnight thing that you can get there. You know, it's little bits of letting go.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And this is like really having some awesome results for you know, the people that you're working with. Tons of people, you know, I heard you mention that you have had certain people have better results working with people like yourself, even more so than therapists, right?
Yeah, I want to clarify that, because I know people. It's a tricky topic, that, right? And I want to preface it by saying I'm not a certified medical professional. I'm not a therapist. You know, I'm not those things. Doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about to an extent, but there is obviously, you know, that level to it, right? So I'm sure there's blind spots and things that I won't have and that I can learn about. What's happened though is that a number of my clients who have been through some pretty tough trauma and have worked with therapists for a long time have said that they have had bigger breakthroughs, you know, in one or a couple of sessions with me than they did, you know, with them. I've heard other coaches report the same thing. Equally, I've heard people report working with coaches and it making things worse. You know, it's not a black and white thing. There's so many things that could be going on here, and it's difficult to say it without generalizing, you know, all therapists in the same brush, because obviously that's just not true. What I'm understanding is that I think the most important thing with this is connection between the person that you're working with and you know, feeling that you can really open up, that they're holding that sort of loving space of non-judgment, to allow you to have the space to explore this yourself and come to terms with it, and do that in a way where you sort of feel safe. And I know that you know, again, people I've spoken with haven't felt that with sort of licensed therapists or people through the NHS or wherever it is that they're going through, for one reason or another. There could be one of many reasons, you know. So I don't want to kind of get down too much of a rabbit hole and say some things that are generalizing and all of that. But I think it really just does come down to who are you as an individual, and who do you really resonate with, and that's a really key thing.
Yeah, awesome stuff, man. Well, it's been a really nice conversation to sort of like go over this stuff, because I think it's quite powerful, and I think maybe the people that are listening to this right now, this might be a breakthrough for them. Maybe it's something that they weren't paying attention to before, and then maybe they do need to take you know, start taking care of themselves and start paying more attention to this sort of alternative side of healing and getting through things. So thanks, man. Let's start to round off the podcast, because I don't want to keep this too long. I know the last episode was really long, so we'll keep this nice and short and sweet. Let's move on to sort of your advice for young people, but I want to put a bit of a spin on this, because we have covered this before. I ask everyone for their advice for young people, but I want to ask your advice a bit more specifically on the topics which we've been talking about today. So what would be your advice for people that are really trying to work on themselves and heal from past traumas, whether that be with a capital T or a lowercase t? You know, what would be your key piece of advice on that?
First of all, accept that you have some kind of trauma which has, for one reason or another, and also the way that you responded to that, again, no fault of your own, because you weren't given the tools and the capabilities and the know-how to deal with this, because our culture's got a lot of problems. Know that that's there. and know that it's okay. First of all, I think that's the most important thing, is accepting it. Then know that that doesn't have to be your future, that you are not your trauma, you are not your anxiety, you're not your problems, and you're not broken. You're none of those things. All it is some cross wiring. You know, who you are at your essence will never be defined by what's happened to you or by the way that you've behaved in your past. No, it just won't. You know, society will try and box you in and give you these labels and tell you that you are this, that, and the other. They might even diagnose you with all these things, these sort of you know, mental health labels. None of those things are who you are. And you know, when you accept what's happened to you, and you accept that there is something going on that's, you know, creating and perhaps causing you to live out the reality that you're living, now just really know and accept that you can heal from that, and you can change, and you can create a new reality. I think that's the most important thing, is because people become identified with what's happened to them, and they become identified with these beliefs, these I'm not good enough, I'm this, I'm that. And then everything seems to conform to that belief. That's how our beliefs work. So we keep recreating situations which seem to, again, prove, see, look, there we go, I got rejected again, I'm not good enough. All of this is your own wiring, is your own beliefs that's creating that. And it doesn't define you. It really doesn't define you. And if you accept that, then you will find a way to heal and to change.
Just quickly, how can we build more healthy beliefs? Is there a way that you build beliefs, or is it something that just comes with time? How's that work?
I'd say one of the most powerful things to do is to get aware of your limiting beliefs. And again, remember that statement, the meaning you give an event is the belief that attracted it. So if there's anything in your life that you're not happy with, what meaning are you giving that event? That is the belief underlying that's attracting it. Cross that belief out and replace it with its opposite, you know, and then that's your new belief. That's your new paradigm that you're trying to wire in. You know, sometimes this is where affirmations aren't always, that they don't work that well, is because if you believe that you're ugly and then you start telling yourself you're beautiful, that's not going to get past your subconscious. So you might want to create like a stepping stone one, you know, where it's like, again, I do this to my clients. It's entirely possible I'm not as ugly as I thought I was. Sounds a little bit stupid, but your mind is going to be like, yeah, okay, that's possible, right? And you wire that in as your new reality. And then you go to, I am beautiful, I'm loving, I'm amazing, these kind of things. Really, this is what it all comes down to, is clearing limiting beliefs and replacing them with empowering ones, because it is your beliefs that make your reality. So yeah, do that exercise, cross out the old paradigm, write out the new ones, and start, you know, using them as affirmations, start imagining that reality where those are true for you, feel those emotions, and very soon you'll start to create that reality for yourself.
Awesome, man. Awesome. We've done this before. Super subjective question, super cliche, but always a lot of fun. I want to ask you, Matthew, Tobias, Matthew, what is your meaning of life? Has it changed since the last episode at all?
I can't remember what I said. I think I said last time my meaning of life is to create, isn't it? And no, it hasn't. It hasn't. I don't think there is any built-in meaning to life. I think that we choose the meaning for ourselves, and that's the gift that we've got. So, you know, let go, be free, and create what you want to create.
Awesome stuff, man. Thanks for coming on. Just in case people want to get in touch with you to maybe, you know, speak with you more about this, and just learn a bit more in general, where can we find you online, so that people can do that?
Yes. So the best way, most of my content is on TikTok at Tobias Matthew. I'm also on Instagram at _Tobias Matthew. And I do have a free Be Your Own Saviour session, which I offer to anyone, which is, again, obviously completely free and just will help you start this work and understand it. So if you do want to do that, at the moment, the best way to book that is to DM me on Instagram.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it, dude. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate you.
So there you go. That's the end of the show. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe on your podcasting app of choice so you can download and listen as each episode is released. If this episode helped you in any way, tell your friends, tell your family, maybe even leave a cheeky review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show. But that's all for now. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next episode, released shortly. Take care.